Now. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Mosaic podcast. Today, I am so honored and it's such a privilege for me because today on this podcast, this isn't really for you. I mean, I'm sure you're going to love what you hear also, but this podcast is really for me. I have in front of me a woman who I sort of heard about, and then she dropped by my house, but it was too spooky when she dropped by my house. We didn't even really know what we were supposed to be doing. But she dropped by my house, we spoke to each other, and I think we freaked each other out a little bit, but not enough that she wouldn't allow me to invite her onto the podcast. She has done something that's called the Connection Cure. And what she's done for the past 3 years is she's traveled across the United States. Does that sound vaguely familiar to something that I'm about to do? And she's one of my big inspirations is that she just got up and did it. And she didn't have all the fancy accoutrements. She didn't have all those things. She just said, there's a pandemic situation that is growing across our world where people are feeling lonely and afraid and on their own and isolated. And that she wanted to go do something about that. And she had conversations with people around the planet, around loneliness and compassion and connection. And this is a native New Yorker. The native New Yorkers don't do that type of stuff, right? But they do. I guess they do now. And so she so inspires me that in the green room just moments before I said, do you mind? Because I'm about to set out May 1st on a journey that will take me across America. And then if it works, and if my body full of pain, and she has a lot of pain in her body also, my body's full of pain. If my body full of pain can deal with the nomadic lifestyle, I believe this will be my mission for the rest of my life, not just for a year or 2 years or 5 years. Because what I really believe is we need people like Lisa that will go out and sacrifice the comfort of their own home and the comfort of of being around their friends to just bring to the world a message that it's not that hard to connect. We can do it. That there's something in the human connection that comes when we're eyeball to eyeball that we don't get when we're iPhone to iPhone. That there's something in the human connection of just coming together and speaking and listening and holding the space for each other that we don't get in text messages or even in phone calls. And so I don't want to make this a monologue because you can come here to hear me.
Keep going. I'm like tearing up over here.
It is such an honor and a privilege to have Lisa Daron Grossman with me today. And Lisa, welcome to the Mosaic podcast.
Thank you so much. I just started tearing up. I mean, I don't think I often, like you said, I don't always get the opportunity to hear something reflected back to me, but also from somebody who's doing something similar. And I think just like in every passion project, I mean, actually I'm making this up, but that in a lot of passion projects, we have like these, highs and lows. And sometimes we really remember our big whys and we feel like passionate and ready. And then other times it's nice to just to remember.
Yeah.
And so thank you for that.
But what I love always about you is how honest you are. It's not like sugar coated. It's not like pretty paint on the wall. It's like a real honest reflection of what life's like for you as you go through it. And I want to invite people to absolutely go to theconnectioncure.com. Don't walk there, run there. Don't run there, fly there. Don't fly there, hyperspace there. Because what she's doing is really important. And she and I both will want your help as we go around because we're looking for new places to go and people to open up to and people to share experiences with. And I don't know about Lisa, but one of the things I realize in my travel and in my setting up the travel is I'm not going out to the world to fix anybody or change anybody or show anybody anything. I literally am going out to the world to hear my own voice and the voices of everybody else. When I sit with the Ku Klux Klan that I'm planning to do, I hate them. I hate the voice of their rage and their anger. And so I'm not going to hear their hatred. I'm going to hear my own hatred. And so really, before we even get started, why did you go on this trip?
Well, it's a big question. And what's I think fascinating about it is that I've noticed that why I originally thought I went maybe wasn't actually the reason. But I mean, I can say that initially it started off, and I'm saying this quote unquote selfishly. I've suffered with chronic pain for a long time, and that chronic pain turned into isolation. And when I was being social, I don't think I was really fully showing up as myself. And I started to learn and research the science behind how social isolation and loneliness affects the physical body. And I had this kind of aha moment, which was, wow, I wonder how my isolation when I'm going through these rough patches has been affecting my physical health and well-being. And the research is there. I mean, I think we all know loneliness has become a topic that people are really talking about now. And I just had this thought, which was, what if I could heal myself through human connection?
Wow.
And that's really kind of the first, that was kind of the first tinge. It was like, this could be possible. And I discovered the work of a social psychologist named Barbara Fredrickson, who was the person that kind of launched me into this real excited space. And Barbara Fredrickson has coined this term micro moments of connection.
I love that term.
It's when people hear it, they go, gosh, there's a name for the thing that I do all the time, you know? And she really studied the science behind these brief, genuine moments of connection. And what she talks about in her work is how when we engage in a moment of connection, a brief, genuine moment of connection with a loved one or a family member, we have this biochemical shift that happens in our body. I think a lot of people would hear that and go, yeah, that sounds pretty normal, not surprising.
Yeah.
But what she discovered was that when we have a brief, genuine moment of connection with a total and complete stranger, the exact same biochemical shift happens.
Wow.
Which means that every single human being that we see passing by us, walking down the street, at the gas station, behind us on the line at the grocery store, is actually an opportunity for healing. Is actually an opportunity for a mutual tune-up to the heart. And I became so excited by this research that I started practicing it in Brooklyn and becoming aware of how I felt, or if I felt different when I was engaging in these moments. And I started to notice that I did. And so that's really how it began.
Wow.
With the baby step.
I love it. So was that the initial thing that set you out, and then you said it changed along the way, or was that what changed along the way for you to discover?
So initially, I really wanted to change myself. I really wanted to just pull myself out of this kind of cyclical darkness that I kept experiencing. And that I think I associated a lot with my physical well-being, right? My actual excruciating body pain that I was feeling all the time. When I got out there, I realized that I wasn't alone in my loneliness.
Yeah.
And I really had made up a lot of stories in my head that my suffering was so hard.
Yeah.
But when you're out there and you're looking at other people and identifying this mutual suffering, right? The compassion comes out and you realize that we're all in it together. And so my journey became about so much more. It became about unlearning. It became about learning. It became about listening. And it also developed into this experience of intimacy with strangers in their homes, in coffee shops, at gas stations, and how these micro moments lead to deepened connections.
Yeah. And would it be fair to say that those moments of intimacy were into me see, that they were literally moments where you would let each other see into each other? Because I doubt you were making love in gas stations, which I want, and maybe you were, like, I don't know, but those moments of intimacy that you experienced, I just want to get clarity on that so that people don't think this was a porn film.
Totally. No, it's not.
Right.
I think for myself, I've definitely redefined what that word means.
Yes.
I think that the heart of humanity, we're all desiring for a level of intimacy. And I
Yes.
love your definition, or your take on, into me you see.
Yes.
Because that to me is something that can happen in a micro moment, something that
Yeah.
can happen in a deepened relationship,
Yeah.
something that can happen through looking into somebody's eyes and actually never even having a conversation with them.
So I'm going against the grain of everything. Let me just ask you the one question that I normally ask everybody to start it off, but I almost don't feel drawn to do it. But what did your parents do that allowed you to get to this place? Like, what did they do when you were growing up?
When I was growing up, my parents gave me freedom. What did they do when I was growing up? I mean, I guess initially I would assume that you were asking, what did they do professionally?
Yeah.
But what comes to mind when you say that is what they modeled for me.
Yeah.
And to me, what they modeled was how to be compassionate, how to allow possibility for myself, how to challenge myself, um, how to value things that might take risk.
Yeah. So I love that, because all those, I mean, first of all, how lucky you were as a kid to grow up in an environment where that happened.
Absolutely.
So
Yes.
I can hear my listeners possibly asking this question. If they're not, I am. Okay. Um, because I grew up in a similar environment. My mom and dad were very available to us. We grew up in a lower middle class family where my dad ended up dying with a mountain full of debt and one black suit. But as much as he wanted to give us all, when he passed away, he left my mom with a mountain full of debt and nobody to be there. And so it was such a big thing that my image of my dad and my life, and because they both died when I was a kid, my mom died on the same day as my dad 2 years later. I started to look more clearly at who they were, because my dad was just this heroic mythological being. Because at 13, that's what you do for a dad, that you make him mythological. What I want to know is, how did that way that you were raised, which just sounds so exquisitely beautiful, how did that contribute, or how did that turn into a girl who felt so alone and empty?
That's quite the question.
I'm sorry.
No, I mean, I mean that in a good way. I think that at my age, and with the space and time to reflect back on how I grew up, I'm able to do it with love and compassion for how I imagine not being a parent, how hard it must be.
Yeah.
I don't think I don't think it says, thinks it wasn't without its challenges. I grew up in New York City, and my parents worked a lot. So, I definitely had a narrative when I was younger that my parents weren't really around. So
Yeah.
I feel like I grew up to value independence. And I think that somewhere in the back of my mind, I attached to the idea that, like, I have to do this on my own.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
I love how similar we are, and we really don't know each other. But I think that you probably can reinforce this more than me. The more we spend conversation with each other and sit with each other, we start to see how similar everybody is.
yeah.
My mom and dad both passed away on July 4th, 2 years apart from each other. So I grew up with a narrative that independence was the most important thing, that their message to me was be independent. It wasn't until about 6 months ago that I was sitting with somebody, and I was just reading the Mosaic, and I was sitting with them and talking to them, and I said, darn, I think I've got it wrong, because gosh, that was 50 years ago. They weren't born on Independence Day. They died on Independence Day. The message they were trying to show me on the way they died was independence is death. We were never meant to do this alone. We were never meant to be independent. We were meant to coexist with each other and to work together and to build a mosaic of lives together, to see how much more powerful we can be when we're together. And I got it all wrong. I spent 50 years of my life living a life that was set up in independence, so much so I became a monk for 10 years. Right? And so it's so interesting that those early stories that we learn aren't even the stories that are real.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. You know, I had a similar kind of realization recently, just kind of noticing how I have this feeling like I need to be successful, and I don't actually know what that means, but I have this other narrative that in order to be successful, it has to be hard, and I have to be sludging through the mud in order for it to actually look like success. Because, you know, as a child, I have memories of my parents just working all through the night, and when we get home, maybe we would have dinner together, and then they'd go to their offices and they'd work for the rest of the night. And I'm out here in Montana right now. I've been here for 2 months, and I found myself in this really extraordinary community that is really about community. And when I moved into this place that I'm staying, it's the first time in 2.5 years that I've been alone in a house.
Wow.
For longer than a month. And I've been here for 2 months. And my first week alone in this house, I'm sitting there and I'm kind of looking around and someone else's belongings, and I'm, you know, it's a rental and other people's furniture. And I called my mom and I was feeling really sad. And I said, Mom, what the hell was I doing in Brooklyn when I was alone in my apartment all the time? What do people do when they're alone in their homes? I was like, I don't even remember.
Yeah.
She said, honey, people work.
Yeah.
When people are alone, they do work.
Yeah.
And it just hit me in that moment. I had this like feeling of, oh my gosh, that is so sad.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's not what I want to be doing all the time when I'm alone.
Yeah. I love how clean you are in your even interpretation of that, because, and how your mom would say it, because I think that's what we all felt. We don't work because we're alone. We work because we're scared to be alone. And so we don't know what to do with ourselves when we're alone. But that's caused a situation where we don't really even know how to connect to another person either. I mean, like what I love about what you're doing is you're just showing up some places and you're having these micro moments that are transforming people's lives. But how do people respond? Because most people that I see, we're pretty protected. You know, even when you came into our house, you know, we were both a little protected. Like, what's going to go on? We have our little walls up, you know, and then gently we let our walls down, and we start to get to know each other, and we allow intimacy, right, to see each other. But when you were going around the road and you're meeting strangers, total strangers, what was that process like? How quickly did walls come down? How quickly did yours and theirs and all of that?
So I think some people have a misconception, which is that I'm kind of stopping at places and I'm like looking around and like, who can I have a micro moment with? Like, you know, like, is that guy look like he's available? You know, and what I've actually leaned into during this is that what it's actually about is how do I be more aware of the moments when I am engaging in a micro moment, and then what do I do with that? I think that we have them all the time, and I think that they're so easily accessible. And I don't think every person is a micro moment, meant to be a micro moment, and I don't think every micro moment is meant to go macro, but I think the ones that do, we can feel it somewhere in our bodies.
Yeah.
So for me, what's fascinating about micro moments is that I believe that it's a practice in building our relational muscles in our brain. And so the more we engage in these brief moments, the more we, I think, begin to understand who we feel safer with, who we can trust letting our walls down.
Yeah.
You know, the science actually shows that, you know, the more we look at other humans in the face, the more we, you know, we spend time staring into the eyes of someone else, the more our brain is able to pick up people's facial expressions. And that sends a message down to our vagus nerve to tell us how safe we feel. And again, safe in quotes, right? Our sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems. And I've seen that without the science being, just a bunch of science, but the actual practice of it is what I've seen, which is sometimes you're just talking to somebody and you feel like,
Yeah.
let's just keep going.
Yeah. I have this amazing feeling, and some people say it's an ability that I have that I'm unaware of, I think, which is I just feel comfortable with everybody for the most part. Like people come in and I immediately think they're my friends. Sometimes it goes against me because people say like, I'm not your friend. Like, what are you like? I don't know you well enough to be that close. But most of the times lately, my wife will always say to me, I don't know how you get away with saying some of the things you say to people, because you go right inside and people, for the most part, let you come in and love you for it. She said people would get shot for doing that some other places, because it's almost as if I assume a level of closeness because I feel it already that may or may not be there, right? So what does it mean for a micro moment to become a macro moment?
The way that I feel like right now, and again, I leave space for all of these things that I'm talking about to become totally different and to shift and change with time. The way that my experience has been with that is that one of the things that surprised me most about being on the road was I thought I'd like hit up a place and then keep going. And I'm like, get into every state. I thought I'd be, I'm like 2.5, almost 3 years into it. I thought I'd be rocking, right? I started to want to return.
Yeah.
And that was a huge surprise.
Started to want to return to where?
To people who I felt really connected to.
I see.
And I ended up in the last 1.5 years just flowing the same circuit, going back to seeing people who I felt just in a moment that I maybe just met in a moment that I wanted to go back to, that I wanted to see again, that I wanted to spend more time with, that I wanted to go to church with because they invited me to church, that I wanted to go visit on a dairy farm because they invited me, so for me, I don't have an answer except that I think it's a feeling, and the feeling creates some sort of knowing.
Yeah.
But it took time for me to be open to that, I think.
So was your original thought of the trip of a connection cure, of you actually going out and sort of healing yourself through the process of moving from isolation and loneliness to connection? Did that help you to alleviate pain in your body? I have my fingers crossed because I have a lot of pain in my body.
I can say without a doubt, I feel like a completely different person.
Wow.
Now, here's the thing. When I met Barbara Fredrickson before I moved to the road, it was like this, huge moment. I'm crying. I'm like, your work changed my life. And I'm going out into, across the country, and I'm hosting workshops and I'm talking about your work. And she's like, oh, you have my blessing. And at the time I had been working with a doctor in New York to test my blood levels to see how was this project actually changing my, my oxytocin and my hormones and all these different things. And I was so excited to tell her. I said, I'm working with this doctor at Mount Sinai, and we're testing my blood levels. And she looked at me and she goes, what happens if you spend, 2-3 years out there and inside of you that you feel different, but you come back home and you still have Lyme disease, or you still have pain sometimes, or your blood levels haven't changed. Does that mean that you haven't done it right?
Good question.
That, the cake is the connection. The icing can be the science, but it's not all of it.
Yeah.
And he basically showed me how the intimacy aspect of it was, again, the thing that I was avoiding. I was covering it up by wanting to talk about the science all the time.
Yeah.
And really, it was about the meaning.
See, I'm not smart enough to understand the science, but I sit and listen to you speak of it, and I go, wow, that's so smart, and that's so, and it makes so much sense. But I just know that when I was always the type of guy that walked into the room and the light came on. It came on for me and it came on for other people because I was just like an easygoing life, happy-go-lucky guy. I wasn't really a life of the party guy. I was just sort of everything was okay. And then through the pains that I experienced over the course of my life, that guy started to say, I don't know about going to the party today. I don't really think I'm sort of much more happy sitting in my own space because that space feels better and the people around me don't feel so good. And they're not people I want to hang out with. And then I wrote this crazy book called The Mosaic, which surprised the heck out of me because it wasn't written about people that I wanted to be with. It was written about the people that I never was with. The street person and the homeless man and the blind woman and the gardener and the waitress and this road worker and the trash man. People that I thought, what the heck am I writing here? But I wasn't writing it. It was writing it for me because it wanted to show me that they're in every single human being, no matter what they do. We aren't what we do. We're human beings doing the things that we do. And every single one of them has something to say if I would only just take the time to listen to them. And I know that when that happens, the joy that I feel is so great that I'm actually being able to make that connection, actually being able to love a brother or a sister that I never even knew I had. It's part of what happens on this podcast. I meet people that I 18 seconds before I didn't know. And we walk away thinking, well, how are we going to see, when are we going to see each other? What are we going to do? What's the next thing? What's going to happen? And it's what I love because we are so much more alike than we let ourselves know. So what I love is that there's actually a science behind this, as well as a feeling that just comes even when you're idiotic like me and you don't even know the science. You just know you feel better.
Yeah, it's like in the beginning, I did this workshop in Colorado, maybe a year or more ago, and somebody came up to me after the workshop and she said, I thought this was going to be just about connection, and you lead with loneliness.
Yeah.
She said it. She was disappointed. I think she felt uncomfortable, and she gave me that feedback, and I heard her and I accepted it, and I kind of put my tail between my legs and sat on it and thought about how I'm doing it all wrong and felt kind of embarrassed, and how can I call it the connection cure, and it took me some time to wake up to the fact that it is about loneliness. Yeah. And but it's about the beauty of it. And the reason I'm relating it to what you're saying is because to me, what is so incredibly extraordinary about human evolution, about how our bodies have been designed, is that we were designed to have this sensation of loneliness just so we have an internal alarm clock for connection, for love, for support. And that is so extraordinary to me. It's so simple and it's so extraordinary that we kind of vilify in some ways in society loneliness, the word, but really it's this absolutely extraordinary aspect of the human body, with our brains and our hormones and our immune system and our heart and our nerves all working together to tell us you need a hug.
That's right. Yeah.
It's like, what?
Yeah.
That is so amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. I share this often, but I don't know that I shared it with you. If I have, we can short circuit because it's on almost every podcast that I do, probably because my daughter is that important to me. I have the blessing of having a 30-year-old developmentally delayed daughter. And what she's taught me is that everything in life speaks to us if we're willing to listen to it. I couldn't understand her. And so when I couldn't understand her, she spoke. And I would say, God, I don't understand what you're saying. So she would yell it because she thought it was the volume, but it wasn't the volume, it was the clarity. And she yelled it, and when I didn't understand it, she would tantrum, and it didn't matter where we were. She would lose everything, and she'd just go crazy and tantrum, because that's how frustrated she was that I couldn't hear what she was trying to say. And when I still couldn't hear it, she would run and try and bite me or rip my shirt or do something to try and attack me or do something. And I realized every single person that I know is exactly that same way. When they speak and they don't get heard, they yell. When they yell and they don't get heard, they create a scene, they tantrum in some way, they create chaos or disrupt stuff. And when that doesn't work, they try and destroy something. It could be a family, it could be a building, it could be a town square where someone takes a gun and shoots into it. That it's so essential to be heard. People want more than anything to be heard. So in that place of loneliness, what do you think the message of loneliness is? If we would not vilify it, if we wouldn't make it yell, if we wouldn't make it tantrum, if we wouldn't make it attack, what does it want to say to us? What do you feel the message of loneliness is?
I think that's a really beautiful question. No one's ever asked me that before. And what I can say personally is I have found some of my deepest connected moments in sharing my loneliness story and hearing other people's loneliness story. And what I've noticed is that there's this invisible thread of connection through humanity because of our moments of our shared experiences of being lonely, of desiring more connection. Loneliness is a feeling of pain that we actually have in our body because we need connection that we don't have. It's not the act of being alone. It's a feeling. It's our perception of what our connection and our relationships feel like.
Yeah, I love that, because having been a monk for 10 years, I love being alone, but I didn't like being lonely. And they're very different feelings. Like when I'm alone by choice and I'm connected to some greater power that's within me, and I feel that, and I feel connected to myself, then I'm never alone. But there were moments in my monasticism where I felt really desperately alone, because I just wanted someone to be there for me, and there was nobody there. Not because they didn't want to be, probably because of the walls of my monastery in my own being kept them isolated.
I find that so fascinating. And I wonder if you feel like you were able to identify for yourself when you, or if you, or as you were falling over an edge of alone into lonely, and how you could for yourself decipher when that was happening.
Yeah, it was very clear, because to this day, I love being by myself, except when I don't love being by myself. Like when I miss the hug of my wife, when I miss the embrace, when I miss seeing my daughter, when I miss just going out and having a conversation like this with, we know each other a tiny, tiny little bit, but the intimacy of this conversation, I mean, I feel like I've known you for 1,000 years now, right?
I feel like you said that before we met.
Well, maybe I did, because I liked what you're doing so much. And when I read the words on your website, it felt like they were my words. And so, but there's a place where what I choose for myself is to be with somebody else. And I don't know how to do that, because the monastery, I'll be very personal and very real. And my wife, and you've met her, my wife is one of the loveliest people that could ever imagine. I can't imagine being with a woman better than my wife for me. I mean, she just loves me in spite of my craziness, maybe because of it, I don't know. But there's so many times that I sort of push her away and pushed her kids away, because everybody that I knew that was close to me, something bad happened to. My parents passed away. My daughter was born developmentally delayed. My late wife died of the most painful breast cancer you could ever imagine, where for 45 minutes, every 45 minutes, she was in blood-curdling, screaming pain all day, all night for 2.5 years. And so I made up this little story of why would I let anybody close to me? They're only going to suffer if they get close to me. So it became a convenient story to hold people at bay because it's too scary to be intimate. It's too scary. Like, I can be intimate with a God that I can't see. Maybe I'm not even intimate there as well. But to be intimate with a person that wants intimacy right in front of me, that reaches out and says, I just want you to hold me right now. Well, what do you mean you want me to hold you? Of course I can hold you. No, I really want you to hold me. And holding my wife, sometimes I know when I'm holding her. And sometimes I'm holding her, but I'm not even touching her, if you know what I mean. And
Yeah.
so I think that you can't have connection unless you experience loneliness.
I always say that when I had that conversation with that woman, I said, well, it's the precursor to connection. And
Yeah.
it's almost like walking in a room with a giant pink elephant and being like, it's so crowded in here, but why? And and I also think you can't have, and this is new for me, maybe you can't have connection without intimacy.
Yeah.
And I recognize for myself personally, again, this definition of intimacy is, I guess this open-heartedness and being seen in all of your mess and still believing you can be loved. That for me, this journey and these micro moments have kind of opened me up inch by inch to allowing more intimacy in.
Yes.
I've had such a profound time in Montana in this community because I've had these like really deep micro moments that I've gone back to see people over and over and over again. And I feel so much love for them, but then I leave and then I come back and then I leave. And there's something that's different now in my life to having stopped and stood still in a community where I see the same people consistently every single day. And I can't run away. And I am a mess. And I am not my best self all the time.
Yeah.
And I can trust that they still love me.
Yeah.
And I believe that every single micro moment that I've had and every single experience has been a breadcrumb leading me here, which will lead me somewhere else.
Yeah. Love it. So I see connection a little differently than most people. Most people think that this is connection that we're doing right now, and we're having a deep connection right now. But to me, there are 3 steps before this. We have to connect to ourselves. And because most of the time, I'm spending my time knocking myself down. So if for those people watching on video, you can see clearly, if I'm doing this all the time, my right hand's trying to hit me and my left hand's protecting me, it's only millimeters from my face. And I don't know where I'm going to hit myself, if I'm going to hit myself in my face, my chest, my groin, my knees, my legs. So I've built a little silo around myself, micro millimeters away, right? That protects me from my own assault. So if I don't connect to myself without that wall, then when I connect to you, it's just my wall connecting to your wall. And there's no intimacy in that connection because there's nothing to see. You see my wall and I've painted it very nicely with what I want you to believe I am, but you don't ever see me because I'm quivering in the bottom, hoping you never peek over the top, right? When I can release that by being kind to myself, and it's really just being kind to myself, when I say to myself, hey, I'm not going to hit myself anymore, then this wall that I've put up so close to me, there's no purpose for it anymore. I can drop that and I go, whoa, look, there's Lisa out there. I see her. and I might bump into your wall too, because you may have a wall up too. But I know now kindness has dissolved my wall. So perhaps if I'm kind to you, we can take 1 or 2 or 3 bricks down at a time. And so kindness will dissolve that wall too. And so then what happens is I say, oh my God, I see I'm not the only one in this silo. There's something else. Well, what else is there? Who's created all this? So there's a connection to source, that when I realize there's something bigger than myself at play here, and it's important for me to connect to that too, to understand what am I doing here, and what's why are we connecting, then it leads to the third connection, which is connection to purpose. That once I know why I'm here and what I'm doing and why, like I can meet with you and have a great conversation, but when I'm purposeful in my conversation, gosh, we can do things that we never would be able to do. And you too. So when we have connection to self-source purpose, then our connection to others becomes transparent with no wall up, kind and loving, vulnerable and open to something else happening, right? And it becomes purposeful. Then those are the times when Margaret Mead said that small groups of people come together and change the world through just their magnetism of being together. And so for me, connection is a huge subject matter. Have you embraced any of that in your discovery of connection? Does that make sense to you, or?
Oh no, I don't know what you're talking. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, of course. I mean, yeah, I mean, this whole, every waking moment is about how I can connect deeper to myself, and I notice on the road, one of the things that I had to face was lack of distraction.
Yeah.
And, in my darkest moments in New York, I was constantly engaged with technology.
Yeah.
And if it wasn't technology, it was other ways to distract. And when you're driving across the country, I started to notice, and in the beginning, I would talk on the phone or I'd listen to podcasts all the time. And then slowly I would notice, well, I don't want to talk to anybody.
Right.
I don't want to listen to anything.
Yeah.
And I started to find a different level of comfort just being quiet with myself. Now, it's not always easy. My goodness, it's freaking hard.
Yeah.
And then the process of through that, how I start to look at my relationship with self-compassion, and how my self-compassion then translates into being compassionate towards others.
Yeah.
And, yeah, I absolutely 100% relate to that. And I think that the connection to the self is the forever journey.
Forever journey.
And I don't think there's a destination for me. I think that there's so much to unlearn. There's as much to unlearn as there is to learn. And I mean that both in the sense, a personal sense, and also societal sense, and also what's happening in our country and what's happening in all of these conversations right now, between the divides and between, the things that we're swimming in a fishbowl and we don't even know that there's, water around us.
Yes.
And I think that the conversation around meaning is also really important when you talk about connection, just both meaning to yourself, but also what is the meaning in the exchange?
Yeah.
And I think that that's why not every moment is a micro moment, because Barbara Fredrickson will say it's a genuine exchange, and other researchers and people that are, thought people, or, people that study this conversation of connection will talk about how there has to be a mutuality, either a mutual sense of care or a mutual sense of meaning, that we're both feeling something.
Yeah.
I don't think there has to be words in order for that to happen.
Lisa, as you were out on the road, what scared you the most?
I think having my inner critic win.
Wow.
Being so attached to my loneliness story that I would never reach the road to unlonely. People are always like, have you ever had a scary situation? Have you
Right.
ever been in a community where, yeah, of course, like I've had, situations where I've had really hard conversations. I've had situations where I've been up against the door at night, terrified that somebody was going to break in. I've had, stories that challenge, moments that challenge my relationship to my religion and things about the country that scare me and sadden me, and again, a lot of awakening to how much we have to learn. But there's always the common humanity of like humanness that runs through it. And there's always the next day and the next moment that reminds you of the beauty. And that's what keeps me going. I think what scares me, I think what scares me is, can I keep going?
Yeah. Does it ever scare you if you can stop and stay put?
Yeah. Equally, what scares me is, will I ever find a home?
Yeah.
What if I don't know how to define that word for myself in a way that allows me to stop? How will I know when I've arrived? When can I stop searching for something and have being where I am be enough? It's a very
Fabulous.
complicated thing you're asking, because there's so many
No,
elements,
but it's so honest. I so appreciate your honesty in it, because it's so beautiful to see someone so vulnerable and so honest and so free with just sharing really, really real feelings. And I think on the other side of it, what has excited you? What have you seen that surprised you, that you thought you'd never see? What could you never have imagined would have happened that has happened?
I don't think it's that I could have never imagined it. It's just it's the element of surprise, because I never knew what to imagine,
Hmm.
if that makes sense.
Unfortunately, too much. Yes.
Yeah. The moments that I reflect on the most are the people that have led me back. I was in a pie shop in Fort Collins, Colorado, and one of the women working there came up to me and she's like, "Have you ever had our coconut cream?" And I was like, "No, I don't eat pie." She's like, "Oh, honey, you need to eat pie. You're in a pie shop, you know." She brings me this piece of pie and she sits down with me and we just start talking. And she just starts sharing about, I said, "Oh, it's so kind of you to give this to me." She said, "Oh, well, I practice random moments of kindness."
Hmm.
And she begins to tell me a story about how her 25-year-old daughter died of a grand mal seizure. And
Wow.
after her daughter died, she started receiving letters from all over the country of people whose lives her daughter touched. And within 15 minutes, we had shared tears and she had shared the story with me. And she said, um, you know, I, I said, "Well, we have to get together. This is so, like, I feel so connected to you." And she said, "Well, I'm going to church tonight
Wow.
um, with my family. Do you want to come?"
Wow.
And I said, "Well, I'm a Jew, just so
Right.
you know." And she said, "Girl, I don't care. I don't care. Just
Right.
come if you want." And we accept everybody. So, I mean, within a few hours, I was at, an evangelical church in the basement of this building in a strip mall. And my favorite memory is that I'm sitting in between her and her husband, who's like, "Who is this person?"
Right. How
And
did you
he
get
keeps
here?
she keeps leaning over and putting her hand on my knee and going, "Are you okay?
Yeah.
Are you
Wow.
okay? Is this okay?"
Wow.
And I've gone back to visit her 4 times now.
Yeah. I love that, because sometimes when we think all we're having is a piece of pie, that's only the door into the room, into the door, into the room, into the door, into the room of some other major thing.
I have so many people like that.
I bet. I bet. It's the beauty of what you're doing. So,
And it's also the beauty of just the nature of humanity.
yes. So when I ask this question, it's the only other question I ever ask that's constant, and it's the last question of the podcast, because I want to be respectful of your time, and I just have so enjoyed you and enjoyed time with you, and I hope this will continue this as I'm on the road, you're on the road, wherever we are.
Absolutely.
Um, for most people, they see a different thing when they look out the window of their home than what you see when you look out the window of your car or the places that you stay or the pie shops that you're in. But when you look out at the world that you see, is this the world that you always hoped you would be able to hand over to future generations?
I'm gonna go out on a limb here.
Please.
Yes.
I love that, yes. Because so many people answer no. Will you take a few moments, because we're winding down, but will you take a few moments and share with me that yes world that you see, that you would like other people to see, so other people can see the world you see?
It's so strange because when I said that, I felt like I wanted to cry.
Yeah.
I have so many reasons to say no. But if I honor the moments and the love and the hand holding and the hugs and the open doors and the strangers who have never met me, that have given me ginger snaps before bedtime and made me a bed and opened the door for me, we have to have hope.
Yeah.
And I see that hope in these small moments of compassion. That when we notice that just like me, you're suffering too. And just like me, I see the beauty within you. Maybe I'm an idealist, but I've seen how my initial judgment of somebody can shift, even when I
Yes.
don't want it to.
Yes. Lisa, thank you so much for spending the most valuable commodity that we have, which is time, with me and the people that will listen to this. For those people who want to get in touch with Lisa, and I can't imagine you do not, even if you don't want to get in touch, go to the www.theconnectioncure.com. Just see the work that she's doing. And if this conversation has moved you in the way that it's moved me, get in touch with her, reach out to her, see if there's a micro moment waiting for you and her somewhere in the future. What I love, just in summarizing this really quickly, what I love is being able to speak to people in all different walks of life. What I love to do and through this podcast is see through the eyes of people that I would never get a chance to see through their eyes. And the world that Lisa has shown me through the work that she's doing, through the relentless moving forward, sometimes scared to death of who she'll be in those moments, but having the courage to keep going forward, has shown us that in a world where the news makes us hate each other, there are a whole lot of people out there that are helping strangers along the way. There are a whole lot of reasons to say, yes, this is the world that we want to hand over. The world we live in is a gorgeous world, a beautiful world, a friendly world, a world that's full of hope, a world that's full of love. And it doesn't matter what color our skin is or what border we live behind. Sometimes it does. But the sometimes that it does gets a lot of play, and the sometimes that it doesn't get much play. And to have Lisa be able to show us, and I'm sure she saw some of the moments where religion and color of skin and being a woman did get in the way and were scary moments. But when I asked her what scared her the most, it wasn't those moments that scared her the most, even though she said, I stood with my back to the door praying that I would be safe. It was the moments of, will I be what I can be, or will I hold myself bound to a belief system of who I'm not? For those of you who are listening, even if you can't go on the road to do what Lisa's doing, you can certainly ask yourself that question. Will you allow yourself the freedom to become the person you were brought here to be, to do what you came here to do? Like the Mosaic, one of the big things in the connection to when you know your purpose, you do what you came here to do. Is this what Lisa's come here to do? Maybe, maybe not. But it's certainly what she's come here to do now. And for her to do what she's come to do now and to share that with us, I can't tell you how much you've touched me in the deepest levels of my being. These were micro moments, macro moments, and moments that I'll never forget. So Lisa, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much. This has also been, that really filled me up a lot. So thank you for seeing. Thank you for seeing.
Well, you are easy to see. So I appreciate that. Okay, for everybody listening, please, if you like the show, like us on Apple Podcasts. Tell your friends about it. We want to build this, because what we're doing is having amazing people like this on often. And until the next time we speak, thank you so much for the gift of your time, spending your time with us today, and for being with us on this podcast. Until soon. Ciao.